record this lesson. I've been failing in the past, but today I must succeed. Are we able to see this?
Yeah.
The concept of supply in education, 2.33.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm able to see.
Thank you. Now, there are members who have been asking me about the notes. I thought that we are on learning management system, and by implication, all of us should be able to access our reference materials on our student portal. I don't know whether that would be true. President?
Doctor, I sent the notes on the group, although there is one person who has talked about missing, but I'll resend them. I have the notes myself.
And secondly, maybe for just personal information, are you linked to the student portal?
Doctor, I sent the notes on the group, although there is one person who has talked about missing. We were once linked to it, but at the moment, no. Yes.
So that means that if somebody has notes, then they should they send directly to students.
In most cases, the notes are sent to either the class rep, who in turn gives to the rest of the class members.
Okay, so whoever that member is, please link up with your colleagues because it is important. It's important. Now, I have today. I think it should take me less than 45 minutes. Then next week we will rush through the entire lesson before the elections. We are saying this that just like demand, there's something called the supply of education, and it means that as a supplier, then you are the one who is producing whatever you're supplying. So you're talking about anything that you'd want to supply. In the general sense, supply of a product, as we made a reference to our unga narrative, you want to supply unga, and we agreed that if the price of unga is increased from 120 shillings to 300 shillings, any serious profit-making farm would love to sell the unga at 300 shillings because in this case they would get more profit. So that the more the commodities is in the more the commodities price, then it means that that will indicate their willingness to supply more and more of that particular product. If the price of unga is reduced by government price setting mechanism, where we have always said it is a price floor. Price floor is where you set your minimum price below the maximum equilibrium price. I don't know whether you people have done that deep economics, but we are just saying that if you set your price, say of unga, 2 packets kg, to a price less than 100 shillings, then there is a high chance that the suppliers will not be willing and will not be able to sell. Why? Because of what we refer to as the marginal cost of production. We do expect that any time a seller sells a product, then they must be able to incur the common average variable cost and the normal cost of production. So the variable costs must be taken care of before a seller or a manufacturer or a producer thinks about any imaginable profit that may arise from that particular investment. And therefore, we are saying here, supply is basically the amount of a product that producers are willing and able to sell at a given price, and of course at a particular time. Very important. In the definition of demand, we say that when you're demanding, there must be ability and willingness. In supply, we also saying that as you supply your product, two things that I will be interested in find out: are you willing to supply that particular product at that particular price? And are you able? Because if your selling price is far much below your cost of production, then you'll be making a loss, and you do not want to make a loss. So basically, we are saying that then you have to take care of your costs of production, so that makes you a willing seller. Now, just like the issues that we've looked about, the unga commodity, then we are saying that the supply of education, unlike other commodity, is not purely tied to the price. And these are critical statements we are saying. In any business firm, especially, I'm making assumption that you have done some economics. Do I make that assumption? Hello?
It's just assume as we move.
Yes? Do I make that assumption? Because I don't want to use unnecessary terms. We can just use simple things and we move on.
Use simple things like that.
So when unapofanya kuuza products, kuna hizi vitu yenye tunasemanga in economics, we have got different types of markets. Kuna hii yenye tunasemanga ni perfect competition. In a perfectly competitive market, huwa tunasema suppliers ni wengi, buyers ni wengi. Because of that, mtu mmoja hawezi kuset price ya product because of that competition that exists in the market. So now what we are saying here is that in a purely competitive market, we expect the issue of price mechanism to be so strong. But here we are saying that when you're supplying a product, then it is not purely a function of price, because education has much more of an economic and a social benefit. And I think we talked about social benefit. I don't know, can somebody remind me about social benefit of education? A simple example. Social benefit ya education kwa mfano ni kama nini?
Education as a human right, maybe you are capable, somebody who has that good education is capable to improve the health or the economic growth of the society, being taken as a human right, something of the sort.
Yeah, there are quite a number of those. Thank you so much. I mean, we say that when you're talking about social benefits, you know that those benefits that may not necessarily be linked to you, to the economy as such, other things that are not necessarily economic, voting pattern, because of education, then one can make the right judgment. We talked about yesterday about democratization, that because of education, then people will make informed political choices. Because of education, then you will make a good choice about how many children you need to have, how you disperse your children, how much of the best diet you require. Because of education, that young girls will not be married at a certain age. Why? Because there are other advantages that may not necessarily be measured, that the society automatically benefits when a society has taken its people to undergo a certain level of education. That's why we are saying that much as government is interested in supplying education, there are many things that will determine that supply of education that is not necessarily tied to what? To the price. Because price means that when the education cost and the educational costs are high, then you do not want to supply that. You want to supply more of that education. But then when you supply more of that education, very few people will be able to afford. See, when the price of parallel, private education increases, then it's a few people who will benefit from that. But then we are saying that beyond the element of price, there are benefits that the society will benefit. There are benefits that will accrue from this kind of education. And that's what we are saying that the society is likely to get. Now, if you want to clearly understand the relation that exists between the price of a commodity and its supply, you have to draw the supply curve. I think we have said that, and so it is expressed. We know very well that when you're drawing a supply curve, the independent variable is usually the price, and then the dependent variable is the quantity supplied, just like we looked at the other one. So here we are saying that the price is 20 and the quantity supplied is that. When you increase, it increases. When you increase the price, it increases. The quantity supplied increases. When you increase to 100 shillings, the quantity supplied increases. For that reason, the supply curve is positively sloped. As you can see here, this is positive. It is positive as it. A positive curve means that it is moving from left to right. That's what it means. A positive curve means it is from left to right, upwards. So because of that, the higher the price, if you make it 80, then the quantity supplied also increases to that. So that's what we're just saying. It is positively shaped. Now we're also saying that so that when the price is increased, then the quantity supplied is increased, and of course vice versa. When the price is reduced, then the quantity supplied will be reduced, and that's what we are talking about, the graphical representation of that graph, of that supply curve. Now we know very well that the law of supply says that ceteris paribus, when the price of a commodity falls, the quantity supplied decreases, and vice versa. And I think it is important you put that vice versa. I'm not using my digital pen today. I think that's why I'm having a problem with that. So we're just saying and vice versa. Are we still there?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, for us to understand the law of supply adequately, we need to know the conditions under which the law of supply applies. These conditions are also referred to as the assumptions of the law of supply. When applying the law of supply, it is assumed that the following conditions do not change. When we make this assumption that the supply curve is positively shaped or positively sloped as it is, then there are these conditions that we must make as an assumption. The cost of production does not change. Government policy does not change. The method of production does not change. And the cost associated with the transport and any forms of communication is held constant. Remember, we are saying that these things do not change. So that means that we assume a constance in these factors we're saying. So a tax rate does not, government policy may be something like the tax. So I'm supplying a particular product, remember it must be at a particular time. So government policy on tax policy does not change. Cost of production does not change from January to the specified period, so that the supply is made constant and things like that. Even the method of production. Now, who supplies education? Nani anaweza kunijibu hiyo? Gava ina supply government.
Alafu kuna hao watu binafsi, for example these private schools.
So the suppliers of education may include government, may include the private sector. So I hope you know that the education is supplied by both public and private sectors. Public supply describes education provided in public institutions by government. So kama wewe uko kwa public institution, uko kwa public primary, secondary, high school, even the university, some of them are private, some of them are public. So if it's a public institution, then we are saying that those are the people who are supplying that education. We also know that the private practitioners also supply education, and they do this through self-help projects by individual entrepreneurs for profit. And I think this is where we must think so much about. Most of the private universities are meant for profit. On this basis, ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask you a question. What is wrong or what is right with government funding government-sponsored students in a private university, as it is happening now in Kenya? What is wrong or what is right with that? Your thoughts, please.
Can I try, Doctor? These private institutions are owned by individuals. So most likely, as maybe if I may politicize,
individuals.
Yes, most private institutions are owned by individuals. So that means that if actually the government sponsor tries to sponsor these learners or these students in these particular institutions, if I may try to politicize it, it may be maybe there's that connection in a way that they want to make somebody more richer as compared to if this particular student could have learned from a public institution.
Somebody else? Members, let's think. I want to look at your critical review.
Okay, to me, I think the government is just doing that so that to maybe to increase the revenue that they get from these universities, because in some cases you get that the public universities are overloaded. There are so many students there, so they take these students to the private universities, still knowing that there's some income they're going to get from that.
Somebody else? Anyway, those are just things that you need to think about. For me, I think that when the government decides and says this is Mount Kenya University, we will get JAB students taken to... sorry?
I was comparing the type of education that is being provided in, let us take an example of MUST, and that one that is taking place at Mount Kenya. There is a lot of joking in the private institutions, and you cannot actually compare the amount of work being substituted to these learners in the private institutions to the learners. So that means that there is shoddy work actually being carried out in most of the private institutions, and we are likely to come up with the raw people to the government.
Thank you. So what we are just saying here is that imagine you have students who went through the normal JAB process. JAB means that there was that joint, or nowadays it's called COOPS. So the placement service has taken these students to Mount Kenya. Others have been taken to Kenyatta University and most. Mount Kenya is a private institution, as somebody has said, meaning that when they get profits therein, these profits are meant for the board of directors of that university. Now you have this student who has come to Mount Kenya, sponsored by government, pays school fees at Mount Kenya University, and this profit that accrues, because these are entrepreneurs, goes in the hands of the directors of Mount Kenya. So you are the one to decide whether that is right or that is wrong. If you look at it from the point that it is an economic, it's an economic issue, in the sense that more profits will go into the hands of the entrepreneur, and therefore do some kind of inequality, taking money from the poor and taking it to private individuals, then that argument may be right. But somebody will say, what would be the problem if there are social benefits associated with education, so that indeed it doesn't matter who is supplying that education, whether it's the private sector or it's the public sector, the benefits accruing from the activity of teaching, whether in the private sector or in the public sector, definitely the same, and whoever will benefit from that education will benefit everybody in the society. So how do you desegregate and say that students who come from a private university are better off because they have better social benefit compared to those who will have social benefits, say, from the public sector? So those are things that probably you need to think about. Factors affecting the supply of education, and we are simply saying here that there are things that will affect government to supply, to make more primary schools, secondary schools, tertiary institutions, and the universities. There are many reasons why government will set in place mechanisms to ensure that we have enough teachers to teach these students and learners in institutions. One of them is the fees charged, or the price of schooling. We know very well that government has done a great deal in subsidizing the amount of money that parents are paying for their school fees. However, we also know that because of the high demand for education, the private sector has come in, and because of that, students who desire to go for further education, sometimes they have to go through paying for themselves private education. In this case, we are saying that the cost of education will depend. If the fees charged is a function of the spaces available, then you do expect that there could be a relationship that exists between those spaces available. But nevertheless, we're just saying here that if the fees charged is high, don't expect so many of these students to come and occupy. And we are just saying that as such, the higher the amount of fees charged is the key determinant of number of places in private schools, because private schools provide education with a motive for profit. Na hiyo ndio tumesema hao jamaa wanafanyanga biashara ya profit, so that the higher the fees, the higher the number of places of private schools. Yani kama tuta increase the number of schools Kenya, kama tuta increase the fees, then hata wewe utaamua kufanya hiyo biashara. Kwa sababu gani? Kwa sababu unaposupply shule, unaposupply, then utapata profit kubwa because of that supply. So those are things that can affect. The converse is also true. If there is no profit in any venture, in any business, then what happens? Serikali pekee ndio itakuwa inapeana, kwa sababu serikali ndio inajua maana ya social benefit na private benefit. Serikali pekee ndio itajua. We know you have heard of something called the free rider problem. Yani a free rider problem ni problem yenye mtu you cannot separate somebody benefiting from the supply of a certain product. Kwa mfano wewe penye unakaa hapo saizi, stima imeenda na ulikuwa na kwa nyumba yako umeweka sola, na hiyo sola inamulika paka kwa jirani. So stima inapoenda na umewasha hiyo sola yako, huwezi kuzuia jirani yako ku benefit. So that problem of excludability, and how do you say that now hii light itakuja tu kwa gate yangu na isiingie kwa compound ya jirani yako? You cannot do that. So government, hiyo inakuwa challenge. Government ina supply education na kuna wote ambao wana benefit, wote wa private, wote wa public. Lakini now when the private people come in, they only want to do it for profit purposes. Expenditure of the cost of production, we know that well, that when the cost of establishing or running education institution is high, then the supply of such will always be below. And I think this is a common phenomena. Kukiwa na sheria kali za kuanzisha shule, sheria kali za run institutions, you don't expect so many people to we don't expect so many people to supply that kind of education. Government policies can either encourage or discourage investment. There can always be positive or negative. For example, bans, taxation, subsidies, directives on fees. Kama saizi wamewambia nyinyi msichaji mtoto kama hana shule, Magoha anakuambia nini? Hakuna mtu mwenye atatoka shuleni kwa sababu ya pesa. Ati serikali ina pesa. So those directives, salaries, free, compulsory education, all those things, mnaenda village mkitafuta wanafunzi waende shuleni kwa sababu wamekataa. These things will affect the supply of education. If these laws or policies are favorable, then there will be an increase. State of the economy, we are saying that richer nations will supply more education opportunities than poorer nations. This is because they have more financial capacity to invest in education. So that's why we are talking about, and you had one of the presidential candidates saying, hii serikali inakula pesa mingi sana, tuwana budget ya 3 trillion. Anasema akikuwa preso, this budget will be reduced to maybe 2 billion or something. I mean, 2 trillion, and not as far as it is because of what we refer to as in economics, something called leakages. Leakages is when there is a lot of money coming out of the circular flow of income because of corruption and things like that. So those are things that we need to think about and meditate even as we supply education. The other thing is about technology, and you are a witness. Because of technology, now we are in class at 10. And so modern technology immensely reduces the cost of production. Like now, you'd be at most paying rent, looking for food, at the same time taking care of your family back at home. But because of this kind of education, technology has made it easy, and therefore the University of Masinde is able to supply that kind of education to such learners. Political stability, I don't want to talk so much about this. We know very well that whenever there is violence, there is destruction and destruction in schools, people are killed and all that. You know what is happening in Northeastern and how they have thrown away most teachers. Most teachers have wanted to get a transfer. Actually, they have done so. Why? Because there is instability, and that, in this case, you do not want to supply education in such a bad, sensitive environment. Cultural inclination, here we are saying that there are people who just generally have a propensity to embrace education. Yani kuna watu tu kwa jamii fulani, kuna majamii fulani, kuna culture fulani, kuna tabia fulani ambayo people would just love to do education, and others do not so. So like some people, the madrasas, you provide education along that line, and probably if you're talking about formal education, it is minimal. And then we have global targets. So mnajua hizo targets za United Nations, targets za UN declarations on human rights. We now have Agenda 4, Big 4 agenda. We have Vision 2030, we have got Vision 2063, we have Medium Development Goals, MDGs. All those things are what we call global targets. The nations of the world come and say in the year 2022 to 2029, we want Africa to be able to do this, this, and this, reduce mortality, reduce increased transition rates, reduce repetition rates, all those things. So when they put those global targets, that will define how much of education will be supplied. Political pressure, we are saying that politicians through their political influence can agitate for more educational places. Yeah. For example, watu wanasema tu hapa kwetu tunataka nini? Tunataka hii college mbadilishe ikuwe nini? Ikuwe university. Na mmesikia hapo kama juzi Raila amekuwa uko Thika anasema hiyo Constituent College ya sijui wapi itakuwa ni around Thika or around Chuka, Meru iko, that it will become a university. Those are political statements. People just come and say, as we will change this into this, so that people can benefit. Level of government expenditure, education expenditure, I don't know, maybe this should be something that you need to think about. How much does government spend on education? Overall budget. Don't answer me now. But we are just saying, if a government says that we will spend 10% of our GDP on education, expect that there will be more supply of educational services. If the budget is less than that 10%, for example, then you don't expect that there will be opportunities created in that education system to have education supplied. The level of aggregate private demand for education. Now, you demand education either as a private entity or a private citizen, or you're just doing it as a Kenyan. And in this case, we are saying that what are the benefits associated with education? Many times when we do private demand for education, we are looking at the individual benefit. When you go for higher education, universities, your university, for example, you're doing a PhD, then who is going to really benefit? It is not the state. The state basically would benefit most if they have done basic education. Beyond basic education, the state doesn't believe that they can benefit so much from you as an individual. And therefore, any other education, further education, beyond the basic education, they believe that many of the instances, the benefit will be borne by the person who is investing that kind of education. So people will demand because they have high expectation about their specific returns. Now, the issue of equilibrium and disequilibrium. When do we say a family is in disequilibrium? Hello?
Hello?
Just imagining that your situation, you are in a situation and it's like you don't seem to be agreeing with your wife, your husband, and there is no agreement. In that case, you are not agreeing on your thoughts, on your understanding, on things like that. In a market situation, the demand and the supply may agree or may not agree. In this case, I'm simply putting in very simple terms. Sometimes you have a situation where the demand is more than supply, and sometimes the supply is more than demand. We are moving into a harvesting season for maize farmers, and now we will see supply of maize being more than people would be desiring to buy. So there will be more supply of maize in the market. When there is more supply in the market than is being demanded, then there is disequilibrium. More supply means there is a glut. A glut means that it's oversupplied. Where we have got less, where the demand is less, where the demand is more, then it means that there is a shortage. Kila mtu anataka unga. Huo unga saa hizi nimetoka hapa kwa supermarket haiko, watu wamenunua yote. So because of that, more demand means there's a shortage. So you come to a place where there's equilibrium, where the demand and the supply agree, and that's what we call equilibrium price, and that's what we want to look at. In economics, an equilibrium price is the price at which the quantity of a good demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. That's what we mean by that. So the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied must agree. They must be equal. It's usually represented by the intersection between the supply and the demand curve. And that's how we're trying to describe this. You have supply, you have got demand, and this is the price. So you want to plot this. We said that as you increase
The price.
this is the price, remember. The price is here. The price is increasing from 5 to 15 to 35 to 70. What happens to demand? We know very well that when the price is low, the demand will be high. When the price is high, the demand will be low. Contrary, we also know that when the price is low, the supply will be low. When the price is high, the supply will be high. So with this, now we can plot, and I think that is what the graph is all about, that when you're talking about supply, the higher the price of a product, the more of that product would be supplied in the market. For when you're talking about demand, if the price of a product is high, then its demand is low. And if the price of a product is low, then demand, you can see here at this particular point, the demand, the quantity demanded will be very, very high. Now, ukiangalia hapa, and these are basic concept that nilitaka tu muelewe. Let me wrap this. We know very well, for example, now that the economy of Uhuru, the government of Uhuru seems to have had serious issues on price of foods and essential goods, for example. Saizi wamesema they have set the minimum price below the equilibrium. Let me assume that was the equilibrium price, E naught. This is just a concept. It's not necessary for you anyway, but I just want you to see how the economy works. That's the equilibrium price. Hii equilibrium price ni price ya unga kabla government ija interfere. Price ya unga ilikuwa ngapi for two packets?
230.
Ilikuwa 230. Wacha tu assume hii ni 230 sasa. Gava ikasema price ya hii kitu lazima ikuje chini 200, 100. That is how we analyze economic issues. So ukiangalia kwa hii graph, Gava imesema kwamba price ya hii product sio venye equilibrium market price inasema. Market price tunasema market price is basically the demand and the supply when they meet at that intersection. Then we get what we call equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity demanded and supplied. This is what we are saying. At that point, probably it will be something close to 70, but not 70. This is what is the equilibrium quantity supplied or quantity demanded. Now, government has done what we call an activist government intervention, intervening in the sense that they have brought a subsidy. Instead of being the price of a product being 230, it is reduced to 100 as we have done. What happens? Hii place penye na kuonyesha hapa na place hapa hivi, supply ndio kubwa ama demand ndio kubwa at this particular point? Is supply greater than demand or demand is greater than supply?
Demand is greater than supply.
At this particular point,
demand is greater than supply.
How are you seeing that? Where is the demand curve and where is the supply curve?
The supply.
Are you seeing the supply here?
Yes.
We are saying that if I reduce the price of my unga from 230 to 100, at that particular reduced price, Nyongesa, you can now mute. There's an echo. At this particular reduced price, what happens? We are saying that the demand is greater than supply at this particular price. Hii ndio price tunaongea kuhusu. Kwa hii price yenye umeset, hii demand ni more kuliko supply. Kwa hii price yenye tumesema 100. What happens when there is more demand of a product? When the demand of a product is increased, what happens in the not natural setting?
The price increases.
So this is what will happen. So kwa hiyo bei ya shilingi 100 hivyo, if nothing happens, somebody is knocking in now. Let come. Evans. We have noted you for late coming. So what we are saying here is that at this subsidized price, there will be a shortage. There will be a shortage. And this shortage will have to initiate some battles between supply and demand forces. So these supply and demand forces will force the price of this product to move up, and unfortunately it will move up beyond the equilibrium price. So that at the end of the day, if we are not careful, the products that the price at which this product will be sold will be far above the equilibrium price. When government intervenes by subsidy, there is a danger that consumers will have to pay much more than the original equilibrium price and pay for something above what they need to pay for. So those are some of the things that you need to think about. So, and how does this occur? Because then market mechanisms has a way in which for you now to get for that packet of unga, lazima upange laini. Na unapopanga laini, shopkeeper atakufavor, akupe the same ama akupe afanye kitu inaitwa rationing. Because now there is a lot of shortage. So you will sell by choice, by preference, by tribe, by color, by religion, by what. So the market is distorted in this case. In other words, that I'm just saying. That was besides what we are talking about. But now that is what disequilibrium and equilibrium is all about. Now we are saying that you will notice that the equilibrium price is 40. This is what they have said. The equilibrium price is 40. Let me just delete all this because this is what we were doing. The equilibrium price is 40, as you can see. That is 40. And you will also realize that at that price, both demand and supply commodity are at 65. Let me just confirm that with this. We know that this place is 65. That is not that dark enough. Let me get something that we can see. So this is the price we are saying, this 65. And at that equilibrium price, the suppliers sell the goods that they are produced, while consumers can get all the goods that they are demanding for. So at equilibrium price, everybody is happy. At a disequilibrium state, then we are saying either the supply is more than the demand, or demand is more than the supply. Let me just take you back. At a disequilibrium price, for example, this price 20 is at disequilibrium. Why? Because demand is more than supply. The price 80 is at disequilibrium because supply is more than demand at that particular point here. So hapa ni disequilibrium, hapa ni disequilibrium. Lakini hapa point penye intersection inakuwa equilibrium. So mahali penye supply ni more than demand, then tunasema ni surplus, ndio hiyo surplus. Mahali penye demand is more than supply, then kunakuwa na kitu inaitwa shortage. And I think that's what we have explained here. We have also said that shortage means that there is a deficit or shortage in supply. So a deficit in the supply of a commodity that falls below the demand by the consumers at a given price. However, in most cases, the equilibrium is short-lived because the market forces always strive to establish an equilibrium. What I was just about to say here is that kama kutakuwa na shortage hapa hivi, market forces huwa zina push. Market forces zinaanza kupush equilibrium. Kama kuna oversupply, market forces zinaanza kupull downwards. Zinaanza kusukuma downwards. Zinaisukuma downwards mpaka tupate kwa hii hii kitu yenye tunasema ni equilibrium price. And I think that's what we need to know. And we have had this example, which again I don't want to repeat. According to this figure, at a price of 90, the supply and demand will be as follows. If the price is 90, according to this figure, let me see whether it is 90 somewhere here. Inaangukia hapa. Tunaweza sema hii vitu sasa ionekani, wacha tuzitoe. At 90, we assume that is 90 and it's coming to 100 there. That is what this note is. Hii ndio hii note inasema supply ni 100. Umeona hapa supply ni 100 na umeona hapa price ni 90, kumaanisha kwamba kuna surplus. Surplus ni hiyo distance na hiyo distance. Let me just take you to the notes. So the supply, the demand is 30. Demand is 30. We go back here and see whether the demand is 30. You can see here, hapa ni 30. So una surplus ya 100, demand ni 30. So hii surplus itakuwa ni 100 minus 30. Tunaelewana hapo kweli? Yeah. So kwa sababu ya hiyo, then surplus inakuwa ni supply minus demand, and that's how we are getting the 70 units. What else can we also say? According to that, if the price is 20 again, turudi hapo kwa hii price ya 20. Wacha nifute hapa hizi vitu so that ikuwe clear. To assume kwamba price hapa, the equilibrium price is at disequilibrium na inatoa hii value ya 20 hivyo. To assume hiyo 20, to assume hiyo 40. Again, shortage itakuwa ni 100 minus 40 from the diagram. Now let me check on the notes. We are saying, probably I should have been more keen. Supply ni 40, demand ni 105. Wacha niangalie diagram kabisa. So maybe 105 ilikuwa somewhere around here. So somewhere around 100 or 105. Of course that is not drawn on graph. Then again we are saying that the deficit is when the demand is more than the supply. So that deficit shortage is what we are saying. We needed 65 units more. Ladies and gentlemen, we have had a lot of discussion about that. And we have this activity. Today you have got 10 minutes. Let me hear what you think. I want to see whether Lea Bwire, can you read for us that? Read for us that statement.
Discuss with your colleagues in your class and write a report on the various measures that can be put in place to increase the demand for education in Kenya. Submit your report to the course lecturer for assessment.
I'm waiting.
Hello?
Is Esther in this class?
Doctor,
Huh?
I am present.
I've just received your SMS. Maybe ndio imenifikia saizi that you're asking whether we have a class. Sorry. Now, we are asking the measures that can be put in place to increase the demand for education in Kenya. Huh?
We can lower the fees for learners.
How do we lower fees? That's a nice one. Next, what else can we do? We are discussing.
Can come in, for example, whatever he's doing for those ones in the extra account, these parents will be in a position to pay the remaining amount of fees.
What about introduction of feeding programs
Oh yeah, that's a nice one.
in schools?
How about it?
If the government introduces the feeding programs, children from poor families will be able to go to school.
Because we know that quite a number of students go hungry. Two, we also know that many of them do not eat a balanced diet. So that can be a very attractive. And I think that's one of the strategy that the hii nini ya Ruto hii inaitanga One Kenya ama Kenya Kwanza. I have been the UDA think that is one of their catch, their catch points in their campaign. Somebody else?
Yes, Daktari. They are just talking about lowering the school fees. What about if we apply this issue of Raila that the school fee education should be free?
And that's the question that we've been asking. How do you make it free? Obviously, yes, that for you to increase demand for education in Kenya, subsidize it to the level where everybody can afford by making it free. That's a good one. Now, can we look at its practicability in terms of, is government able, in Kenya government for this particular case, able to marshal all its resources, ensure that people can get free education?
Presently, it is not practical because when we look at the state of our economy, you get that the government cannot have that free education.
Okay.
To that, in addition to that, there is a lot of corruption in Kenya where money goes to pockets of few individuals.
And we are still relying on debts.
And you're still relying on that. So yeah, so that's a good thought. Somebody else?
Doctor, I think it is possible because we have had an issue of somebody actually pocketing 2 million every day. if actually we can have somebody who can look into the issue of corruption, then there is a possibility that you can have a completely free education in Kenya, because this 2 million that is going to a particular individual can be shifted to pay fees for these learners who are in a position of poverty.
Okay. These are nice thoughts.
It will
I
only
think
work.
that someone is still they are still the corrupt persons.
Now, if I may be more specific, in our areas of operations, how have we been corrupt? Just looking at the corruption of a teacher. Number one, let's assume this teacher carries a pen from the staff room. A pen is costing how much?
10 bob.
Judy.
Assuming that staff room has how many teachers?
50.
So 10 bob times 50 is 5,000. If the school was supplying a pen each day, you multiply by 5.
500.
Let me assume further that this teacher comes to class at 8:40 and not 8. How much money or hours? Yes, how many man hours will have been lost? You multiply that 40 minutes times the number of students. So this corruption we are talking about, don't you think it is us who are most corrupt than these political leaders?
For me, I feel teachers they are not satisfied with their salary, so they have to look for other businesses to operate before coming to school.
And who is
Money is not enough.
Yes. Sasa hiyo ndio tunasema, tukiangalia corruption Kenya, is it our political leaders or even us? And some of us who are in I go to church, I'm a pastor, and how many of us are accountable to our friends, our spouses, our children in terms of financial expenditure? Before we say
it is a disease that is eating everybody.
Before we say Gava is corrupt. Now, suppose there is a change in educational policy that affects the curriculum. How can we increase demand for education?
Pardon, Doctor?
We have a change of curriculum, and the question is, how do we use this question that I've been asking? We're asking ourselves, how can we increase demand for education in a situation where there is a shift in the type of curriculum or education system that country is offering?
Okay, let me try. For example, right now there's that shift from the 844 system to this CBC system.
Hello?
Yes, somebody's talking. Give him...
Hello?
Yes. Oh, we know. Continuous talking, whoever was talking.
Charity.
Okay, I was saying this. Right now we are having that shift in curriculum from the 844 system to the CBC. You get that it is increasing the demand for education, in that there are some of the students or the pupils who are not fit in terms of academics. But right now they can have that access in their in areas of specialization. For example, those who are, that's according to their talents. maybe the footballers, athletes. So you see that it is also increasing that demand.
And besides that, we are saying that, why are we going to school? Because that is the reason why we want to demand education. Expected benefits, human capital theory that we've talked about. Of course, we looked at the criticism. So what we are simply saying is that now, how do you apply all those things that you have learned? The human capital theory, supply, demand, the factors affecting supply, factors affecting demand. Therefore, in our Kenyan situation, how do we make it quite applicable and reliable and relevant to our current situation? So, yeah, that with the current change of syllabus or education system, then the parents, the stakeholders, the students, the pupils must see that there are benefits associated with this kind of education. That's the reason why they will want to demand more. If you do not do creation awareness that this thing has its advantage, that we will benefit, that our children can become footballers at an early stage, they can become singers, they can do what? If we can give them that kind of opportunity, then people will see the reasons why they should go to school. So thank you so much for participating in the class today. I want to stop this recording and send you